take notes, whatever you think is best.
We can record.
Yeah,
I think recording.
You can take notes, both.
I can.
And all take notes.
If you make one of us co-hosts, or you can record it and later send it to us if you'd like. I think because you're the host.
It's
I'm
happening.
recording it.
Okay,
I've never tried to do this on Zoom, so that's my caveat, but I am recording this beginning now.
Great.
And thank you for that reminder. That's an
It will-
excellent idea.
It will naturally just go into a
Of course.
folder after the meeting.
So
Yeah.
that's
So, thank you, Diana. Exactly. I think, you know, we don't have a specific goal for this, you know, and just to make it very clear, the catalog is set, you know, there's no, exactly, we're not working on the catalog except
of course.
in terms of some very small details, you know, titles for things. Sarah and I have been working really hard on trying to make the titles a little bit more in the way that we've been doing this project, you know, so that it's a little less academic kind of you know, omnipotent, like omniscient voice that sort of says shaman figure represent, you know, like these very abstract things. But we've been trying to bring those things alive a little bit more and be a little more personal in terms of the kind of titles that we give them. But we're really still kind of in the process of doing that. So that may be something that we can look at or talk about very briefly, but what we're really looking for is a way to bring the exhibition alive and to communicate all of these many things that we've learned in the exhibition, right? And I don't know, I think, Diana, we don't even have completely fixed parameters for the kind of text that can go in the exhibition, as in we have some flexibility there, you know, and we are allowed to be creative and we are encouraged to be creative. A lot of the labels and texts will go onto a digital something, you know, like it will be in an app. So there's not going to be labels and big amounts of texts on the walls, just so that people are aware, but some absolutely can be. And I anticipate certainly kind of the big introductory stories and some of the kind of key themes that we want to bring across in each section or with some of the pieces. Those, you know, will be on the walls there, and there's different ways of doing that. And it will be in English and in Spanish, just in terms of sort of practicalities, at least at LACMA. Rex, I think same as at Houston, no?
Yes, absolutely, without fail.
And I should say that the Spanish component, we're still sort of working out how we're making these digital guides, how they sort of function in the space in LACMA in general. I think the intention is generally for Spanish and also any third language. We're experimenting now with trilingual exhibitions. I think any of those, any additional languages go in the app, but the major didactic panels, like the introductory panel, would be bilingual on the wall for sure. But it sort of remains to be seen kind of the play of Spanish and English on the wall versus English on the wall, Spanish in the app. So that's still a little fluid right now.
May I just introduce one other thing as a sort of prelude to what I would like to talk about later, and that is we are tasked at the MFAH with creating more immersive experiences in general around this exhibition and with non-Western art, you know, writ large. And one of the things we do want to explore is how language can be part of those immersive experiences and not just explanatory text. And so that I leave it there. I do not want to channel any of that, but we do, and we are going to be looking very closely at all sorts of layered audio experiences, both the things that Diana and I were talking about earlier in one of the rooms to create certain ambiences, but also via the app that the user could choose. So I really don't want to get us off track right now, but I do want to introduce all those things because we are going to be looking at our learning and interpretation is already on this. That is something we want to explore, and its relationship with language certainly should be a part of that.
I agree with that. I want to say briefly too, I like what you're talking about, the immersive experience. I think that's especially key for this show, and that the language of everything from a simple label to a didactic panel, we want to encourage people to be looking at the objects and the works and experiencing them as sort of living pieces in the space, and not barraging people with so much text that they feel like the thing they have to do is look at their phone most of the time or look away at a label. I know I have a bad habit in exhibitions of, as an editor and a writer, reading the texts and forgetting to look at the objects. So I think our challenge here with this is how do we use language in a way that is economical, but inspiring, that makes people look, not at their phones, not at the walls, but at the works, and to experience them that way.
I just wanted to say that to remind us all that we conceived of the exhibition as an immersive experience from the beginning. So we will have the projections on the wall. We have commissioned music with the ancient ocarinas that are going to be just composed sounds that bring the objects alive and are going to be present all the time. So anybody who enters those galleries will already be in something really different as other galleries, if we respect that original plan. So just to remind us of that we can use that also as an experience. The other part of it is that sometimes text we could have an audio guide. I don't know. I mean, a text read to you in such a way that you are almost listening to, if the texts are written with that intent of being immersive and producing metaphors or poetic, relevance, and we would have the opportunity to for an audio tour, that could be very nice.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I mean, Rex very well explained exactly how, in a very succinct way, how we're trying to use language in these exhibitions. And absolutely, like we have a lot of things open to us right now. So especially if we're looking at poetry, for example, obviously like hearing that and having that spoken is a very different experience from reading it. And so that is something that we can also look into. So I think that's kind of the overview, like parameters of what we have to work with and what we have to play with. And then we can kind of go from there. Go ahead, yes, Roberto.
So I have a question then, which is about parameters, I guess. How bold can some of these design issues be? In other words, it seems to me that given the discussions that we've had in the past, and for Sarah and Chelsea and Hector and Maria Alicia, I had the opportunity to have Mamo Haison speak to my students. Mm-hmm. And I actually recorded and transcribed that conversation. And I've done nothing with the transcription yet. I just, it's for future use of some sort, and this could be one of those uses. So I'm happy to share that with you all. But it seemed to me that there's a way in which if there's going to be some sort of text design in the rooms, and that space is going to be reflective of space as some of these objects, messengers, are found, that much of this will be about setting mood. And I really believe that moods are ideas and not just vague sort of sensations. And that a minimal amount of text can actually establish the mood. And there's so much in what Haison shared with us that seems to me could be just so evocative and much more commensurate with the idea of the show, with the meanings of these works. But it seems to me that they would have to be very bold. In other words, the text might be like larger than it's ever been at the museum, right? That in that case, I would suggest working with either an artist, a practicing visual artist, or a designer who could give it a particular vision. And if that artist were indigenous either to California or to Texas in its different instantiations, that could add an additional layer of meaning as to how these objects, which belong to an indigenous cosmovision, can speak beyond their particular place and time.
I feel remiss that I did not lead with the native voice. and how to incorporate and resonate and all of that, because a lot of what I think we want to do with immersion is immerse the audience in different layers and different experiences that have some purchase on the with the native voice, correct? And that was a mistake on my part. I should have led with that.
And just, I mean, I think that's what you and I have been talking about, Rex, for so long, is also creating these trans-Indigenous or cross-Indigenous conversations, right? That they could be, I think, very, they're experimental and they may be critiqued, but I think they're worth exploring.
Yes, Hector, I know you have your hand up. Exactly, very quickly. Rex, completely agree. The whole point of the exhibition, or the key thing that we're trying to do is get people to see the world in a different way, from a different perspective, right? That's the whole point. You introduce them into this different way of seeing the world. And so that's exactly what we're trying to evoke through these many ways that you're talking about. Hector.
Yes, so this issue about the representation of indigenous voices in museum exhibitions with archaeological artifacts and ethnographic artifacts is very difficult to do in practice, although theoretically we already know those difficulties that will arise under our project. So I just want to express my point of view of some of these issues, and I think, as Roberto said, that this is not only a matter of incorporating other voices, but also how do we present them in the exhibition and in the catalog. So one mistake that I think, again, theoretically, we can avoid is presenting indigenous voices as separate from curators' voices. We already had that experience in one of our exhibitions here and in other exhibitions, but I'm talking just in my experience in the museum with an exhibition we made of molas, the cuna textiles of Panama and Colombia. So the idea to avoid that distinction between indigenous and curators' voices was to blur the frontier between myth and history, truth and cosmology, and so that kind of divisions that we should try to overcome, although we might fail. So that's one thing. The other thing, it's a little bit more difficult, and again, the example of molas could work as a point of departure. It's the continuity or the alleged continuity between pre-Hispanic societies and contemporary indigenous societies. I know Diana, Maria Alicia, and Julia must be tired of hearing me saying this again and again and again, but I think it's worth it. We already know that that doesn't work in a historical and anthropological point of view, although indigenous people today claim that pre-Hispanic heritage as part of their living society. So that's a difficult issue, but I think we have to address it in order to not just collapse indigenous diversity today with pre-Hispanic diversity today, because one of the problems that has is that it assumes that pre-Hispanic people really evolve from the conquest and the colonial settlement as just as a continuity and not the disruptions that actually occurred during that process. And just to end, I see that Diana raised her hand. In the case of molas, the Kuna indigenous people that work as curators in our team, they insisted that they were in fact heirs of pre-Hispanic people in that territory, and that's the way they claim that they actually belong to the territory in which they are today. And we know from ethnohistorical and archaeological evidence that that's not true, that they actually migrated from other parts of the continent to that part, and that the establishment of them in that part of the continent actually was kind of violent to other pre-Hispanic or native people in America. So that's part of the history that I think we have to keep in mind, because on the other side, they insisted that we should say that they were there from the beginning of time. But again, time is different.
I agree with you, Hector, 100%. I think I also experienced that when I was at the Museo Nacional de Antropología, and it's very different to deal with these issues from LACMA or from NMFA than from our countries where that discussion it's really like kind of so concrete, no? So I think also it is important to say that we have many different places of origins for the objects we are exhibiting. So we cannot have only one indigenous voice and not all of the others. So that makes it true that we are communicating a point of view. We have been led throughout the exhibition by learning how to think from the indigenous point of view in conceptual terms. We are respecting important notions and concepts about time, about identity, about the reason of being of these objects that are really brought to us through the words and guidance of Mamo Camilo and Hyson. So I think those are our realities. I mean, we didn't do an ethnographic work deeply into each of these regions of Colombia. We just really began a process where, as curators of ancient art, we wanted to connect it to a vision that is not this scientific vision of the 21st century that assumes that our knowledge is superior than other knowledges. That is the most important message that we are trying to say, that we are shifting the point of view and we are letting, in a conceptual manner, Mamo Camilo and Hyson, because they were the ones who did this, guide us through how to look at these subjects differently. And absolutely, I wanted to share with you that the conversation, this conversation of how to think of the objects, how to think about a museum, how to think about the dialogue between indigenous communities and women from Los Angeles that represent a museum, all of that affected us as much as affected them in a, I would say, really in a very positive way. I was just sent a message by Mamo Camilo through Clara Llano, really saying that to think differently of museums, what it means to preserve culture, it's something that he wants to continue to do, and he's using this methodology of dialogue within their indigenous communities in Colombia, in La Sierra, with the conflicts that are having now. And he points as an example the way we could work together. So I think that is, we should reflect. I love what Roberto brought with having Hyson in his class. I think we should bring in all our texts the conversation, the dialogue, we see these things like these and these, like, if we could have this dialogue. And the other important and beautiful thing that we can have, and Hector and Maria Alicia, you are the ones that pray by example. I mean, the Kogi myth of creation, that it's at the museum, no, carved in stone, in black stone, and it's carved in black stone, and it's talking about the beginning of time in that beautiful poetic text. I mean, those kind of texts, I use it to introduce Mesoamerican myths of creations. It doesn't matter that it's Kogi, but because it's such a potent, amazing concept of Genesis that really, you just have to say, this is the way the Kogi think today, but actually, no, the Mesoamerican myths of creation use the same concepts. You can jump to say that. So if we would choose, for what Roberto was saying, some of these important texts, even with one or two, you know, that are really recovered from indigenous transcriptions or are really part of them today, even the one you have, some of those can work as these texts that Roberto pointed out, and it could be bold and we could bring it into the exhibition. The other part of writing, I think it should be reading as these dialogues, this conversation with different concepts, and make whoever reads them aware that those concepts come from the leadership of like a specific indigenous people, no? Like, so if we bring this more to a conceptual terms, less historical, less ethnographic, we could really use the text. Also because all of the sections in the exhibition that Julia can introduce and present at more detail are based on those concepts, are already based on how to reflect on our prejudices. That is why we have a colonial, you know, sort of buffer area where a lot of concepts were established that we are decolonizing. So the structure itself helps us to write texts that are going to be really illuminating. And if the tone is that of a conversation of you know, a tertulia, like the old tertulias, when you really talk about important things and not, that could be the tone that really is immersive and will help lead the visitor in a different way, not the authoritative way of the museum. That would be my intuition around this.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. Exactly. I was going to say sort of one of the same things and then one completely opposite thing, which is, on the one hand, you know, we definitely want to get away from this authoritative voice, and I completely agree with Hector that it's really difficult when you know, are relying on ethnographic information, or you're relying on information of indigenous people, that, you know, you deal with this. Exactly. I don't think we should go down the road of trying to address the continuity issue. It's just about having a completely different perspective on these pieces that we normally would have never had. You know, like, we wouldn't have thought of these things in this way because of the way that the framework that we're brought up in. And so having this other point of view, even if it's not accurately historically, you know, something that can tell us about Nariño objects, like, that's not the point. It's just about being able to be open-minded and see things in a completely different way. So I think we should, you know, exactly kind of make it clear that we're not, that we're avoiding, or we're not trying to, you know, be kind of historically prescriptive. So having this kind of general evocative language in there, I think, is mainly what we're hoping that Roberto can really help us with. And I think the aspect of the conversation is kind of the opposite thing to that, because we have, on the one hand, this thing that's trying to be very general and that's trying to evoke a way of seeing the world, and it's just a different kind of spiritual approach to these works and to the whole perception of the exhibition. And on the other hand, we have this very, very personal, exactly, conversations that were very specifically like what Hyson said to Diana, and the way that met, and how that taught us something and taught him something, you know. And so sometimes I wonder, you know, and somebody's asked me about this, like, if actually a very transparent, almost personal approach in the exhibition is helpful, where you are transparent about who is saying what and why they're saying that and where they learned that. You know, where is that information that we are presenting to the public coming from? Like, how do we know that, or why are we saying this? And so I think, you know, you could almost have quoted names and like actual conversation, but on the other hand, you also want to have this, like, the mood that Roberto talked about, you know, like this sense and this overarching, exactly, immersive kind of understanding of what we're looking at. I don't know whether those two can play with each other or can kind of coexist. They probably can, but exactly that. I feel like we should be looking at both of those aspects.
So I will just add that I mean, all this is very much in line with what I was thinking. The conversational aspect, of course, is very difficult to represent in language without it becoming a script. So, but poetry does this best. I mean, I really do believe that poetry is a choral. And that the choral is where the self and other are blurred, where myth and history are blurred, and not in any kind of vague or general way, but in very concrete ways. And maybe some of the exercises that can be done, the first word that came to mind is the idea of how to establish place. Placemaking is what in my understanding of Haisson's vision, that the messengers establish place in geography and place in time, right? And that can be evoked with a minimal amount of language, much of it from the kind of descriptions that Haisson was talking about. And if I understood Haisson, Rex and I were talking about this, is that he's both a representative of his peoples, but he's also an activist. He's an advocate, right? And so that the whole, I've just been listening to Walter Mignolo give some lectures, and we're never going to get away from coloniality. As he says, coloniality is not over; it's all over. So if we just sort of take that as the ground of operation, then which is no small thing, because it keeps us ethically in check, then I think that we can come up with some possible experiments. And that I think that, again, as I mentioned to Rex, we have to be willing to say that this is a failure as well, because otherwise we fall into other kinds of just, assumptions. So that the failed projects to me are always the most interesting. And so I hope this is a failed project.
Maria Alicia has raised hand, but I just wanted to say two things. Sorry, Maria Alicia, but I think it is absolutely right that poetry can integrate dialogue, and through poetry you could integrate these very key concepts. And one of the exercises I am proposing here is that we all write those key concepts that we want to communicate. So it is really those concepts, because those are going to be the basis of the text. Let's think of the concepts, each one of us create a list, and then we can, I'm sure that we're going to be saying almost many concepts that are the same, but the ones that are different, we can really discuss, because that failure, there is where the failure is, where the imperfection is. We can do something interesting with that. And I write poetry, so I would love to offer myself to being able to express these things poetically with the accuracy of what we want to do too. But I think what you are suggesting, to establish place, to establish, you said it so beautifully, Roberto, like to establish the dialogue and to establish those important concepts, because it's not only place and geography and time, through texts that are evocative, poetic. And then I think because we have this other part of the app, you could go to a website when you can have historically accurate information about the cultures, yes. You could be just evocative and curious and moved by what you're reading and experiencing and seeing, and then you could go to a site to educate yourself. And so we could have kind of a balance with both, but sorry, Maria Alicia.
Yes, just wanted to say that I have difficulties with the opposition between our way of seeing the world and the indigenous way of seeing the world, because it's not, because when you really look at those at the indigenous cultures, the ways of being in the world, there are many ways, as different as with us, no? Among them, between them. So we took, for example, we took this wonderful course with, a short course with, ¿cómo se llama, actor? Juan Camilo Niño. And well, we looked at many ontologies, completely different, different ways of thinking about the humans and animals and the earth and the cosmos, and the way and the place of humans in those worlds. So we shouldn't present the indigenous world of view as one way of seeing the world. So I think I understand your concern and your intention with the exhibition, but I think we have to be careful not to show the indigenous world, the indigenous way of seeing the world as one and opposite to our world view, no? And I don't know how to, I understand, I like the idea of dialogue. Probably if we enlarge the dialogue, I don't know, but it's something we have to take into account.
I mean, I'll just briefly add that the hardest thing, of course, is that anything that's on the wall of a museum has an authoritative value, right? Now, if it immediately disturbs the viewer because it does not correspond with their understanding of what museum text is, then you're already kind of refuting the authoritative voice. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that it should be that because it's disembodied, any subjectivity can inhabit that voice without any kind of categorization or description of whom that voice belongs to, right? And that's a way of getting away from the our, them, us, others, self, other, dilemma, which is really that is the dilemma of coloniality, right? I mean,
yeah.
It's really very, very impressive. And I think it's only through metaphoric writing, which is poetry, to use words to evoke and to evoke concepts that are different, that confront you with a different point of view.
Right.
Because I agree with Maria Alicia. I mean, we cannot begin to even try to represent the other's points of view.
Right.
It is just, I just want to say that really through this experience, we allowed ourselves to be changed. We allowed ourselves to be touched deeply. And it should come from that experience. And that in a sense, we have been touched deeply, all of us, by the world as it is today. And in our personal contacts with indigenous ideas, concepts, works, we have to show that we are not only studying it through our minds, but we are really using it to question our world, our dominance, that is why we're here. So if we can communicate that, I think it's a good grano de arena, to the cultural conversation around. It's really the hierarchy of cultures and the hierarchy of ideas and the hierarchy of doesn't have to deal with colonialism only. I mean, it is imperialistic. It is everything, and culture and museums are and art are a way to just like wake you up a little bit and say, oof, I'm also worth it as personally, as an individual. I don't need to follow, in a sense. Something that simple, it's worth it. And with the intention of Jason and Mamo Camilo, that really was communicated in a powerful way of respecting the balances of nature, of seeing who studies the balances of nature and respect them, and their humble way of living as a reflection of that deep thought of how nature works. I mean, only that idea, it's worth it, you know. So, or only the idea that these pieces are messengers from the past, messengers that are telling you something, that are not only valuable in terms of monetary value, in terms of how good artists they were, you know, that they bring messages from a world that is our world still. Like those kind of respect for the pieces, and not this very cold way of relating to the objects. Oh, even that humbly, it's enough, you know, to put it in the hands of the viewer, of the experiencer.
I would like to go back just for a minute to something Hector said, and I think Maria Alicia was also resonating with, and that is, let's never get into that trap where we segregate the native voices from the curatorial voices, that they always have to be interpenetrating. And I also want to honor Hector's thought that, you know, we are art historians and anthropologists, and that is something that is, I think, not a bad thing. And I even think that a lot of the best art history has developed out of these meaningful dialogues with, and you can go all the way back to the 1890s and Warburg at a Pecos, at a New Mexico indigenous event, being literally overcome by how much he had been missing by only looking at Renaissance and Baroque art, literally, physically overcome. And that is one of the most beautiful passages I've ever read in art history. Let us all be like him as art historians and anthropologists as well.
Can you share that text?
Sure. I'm a little bit of an evangelist for that text. Yes, I will get it to everyone.
Thank you.
Sarah, you had your hand raised.
Oh, yeah, Rex, thank you for mentioning that text. I would love to read it. Before I say what I was intending to say, just on a personal level, it kind of reminded me of the experience of editing this book. I've always been, my area of real interest has always been sort of modernism and European modernism, and that's always the stuff that I felt like, oh, that's the art that speaks to me. And I appreciate all sorts of art, but that's the art that speaks to me. And I had the same experience editing a number of these texts, and as the photography for a lot of these works and these messengers, as we were seeing them, as the designers were sort of proposing layouts. I can't wait for people to see the book. It's so gorgeous. And I had a very similar experience of, oh, I guess modernism isn't necessarily my thing, like being so moved and struck by some of these pieces, and just kind of in our design presentation, sort of staring at the screen and kind of feeling my heart beating a little faster was so wonderful. Like I felt like it was that movement from appreciating this work aesthetically, which I felt I always did, to appreciating it emotionally and intuitively in a different way. So I think I think your text that you're talking about is wonderful. That really resonates with me. Maybe we can find a place for that in the exhibition as well. Maybe there's a place to quote that. Yeah. So I'm so happy that you shared that that instance. I think it can be really instrumental for, I think, in the exhibition for a lot of visitors. And I also wanted to, and this was what I was originally intending to say, I wanted to go back to what Roberto was saying about disrupting the institutional voice. And I think that's so key here. And as an editor, my task is so often to sort of balance the curatorial voice and the institutional voice. And I'm always keeping the institutional voice in mind. So this completely upends what my habit of being an editor is. And I welcome that. I think it's a great exercise and challenge for me personally and creatively. One of the ways I was thinking as we were talking about all of this and talking about kind of the colonial and imperial way of looking at things and looking at art, and this idea of categorizing every single solitary thing. Kind of from, sort of the tradition of the cabinets of wonder, and look around the world at these strange objects that came from all over the world. And this very sort of European centric way of categorizing things and naming things and breaking them down into their little constituent parts. And it's kind of what we do in an exhibition, right? We have every object, and every object has a label, and we say where every object came from and what it's made of and when it was made. And we have that checklist in the catalog, so that data is there. What I like is this idea of, if we disrupt that, we don't need a label for everything. We don't need a label for every single tunho, every single coquero. We can have them in groups. We can sort of present them, because the power of these works is not individually, although they are powerful individually. The power of them is as groups and in dialogue with each other. So if we have groups of these things in cases, we don't have to have a label for, if we have a dozen tunhos in an object, in a case, we don't need a dozen labels. We have one label. What is a label even? Do we need a label? Is it just a little poetic intervention in that case that is more about what is the message of these, what are these messengers saying, and not, this was made in this region of Colombia in sometime between 1000 and 1600 of the Common Era. So I think thinking, like, drilling down to the specifics of what do we do with the 400 works in the show, I would say we don't have 400 labels. and I confess that part of this is a selfish thing of like, yay, then I don't have to edit 400 labels and then translate 400 labels and then upload 400 labels onto the digital guide. But I think this is a nice way of drilling down to the specifics of how do we disrupt what you expect from a museum.
This is a radical proposal. And the truth is that even if you try hard to remember the time and the name of the culture, when you're not familiar with them, you go out of the museum, have lunch, and then you don't remember. And you use your, and we should provide a place where you could go and check it up. That, I think, all our digital, that, you could go into the website of the exhibition and you can read and learn more, and even be connected with Museo de Loros, writings, or we could provide that, like, or that, and it's already in the catalog. So I really would love if we could create these dialogues with the pieces, us as curator, with the objects, and and kind of create the conversations like that. I agree with you. I would love that. And I would think that people would be moved to feel them much more than to make them study, as you need to memorize all these things. No? And it also puts you in a different mood in a museum, in a sense. You are not there to be more cultivated, more knowledgeable. You are there to experience yourself through experiencing the other, which it's a value in itself. It's one of these indigenous values that we learned through the conversations with Mamo Camilo and Jason, that, like they say, we really understand each other, we become family. No? I mean, it seems like such a simple phrase, but really it is true. If we really understand each other, we really feel each other, then we are really connected, and we would do something for you and you would do something for me. It's not, you won't forget that experience. So I totally agree with what you're saying, but I know it's very radical, and just, we would need to be all in sync for this. So anybody thinks differently?
No. I mean, I would, for example, just recall, and it's in the transcription, and it is what I eventually asked my students to use as the analogy. And for me, this is where the so-called division between worldviews of any particular culture blur in the surrealist privileging of the analogy as a way of thinking, is the instruction that Mamo Haison gave to my students, which almost read as a Fluxus score, which was to plant a seed, if you recall, and to every day care for the seed as it grows for over 2 weeks. And then that was the definition of, because you'll recall, I kept pushing him because I didn't understand his understanding of the object. This was for him the description of messenger, of object as messenger. And it had to do with both, and it brought together all his concerns. His advocacy as an environmentalist, right? Because if you care for an object from the past, then you're caring for Mother Earth or the Earth in the present. And it is an exercise in attention, right? And it's an exercise that blurs the difference in vision and the difference between self and other, and also the human and the non-human world, right? So to me, just even having that language almost as a Fluxus poem of the instructions for planting a seed and caring for it seems to me vital for this exhibition.
Maria Alicia.
Yes, what all of you have been saying, and mainly Sarah, reminded me of a conversation we had yesterday with Luis Fernando Franco. You have been working with him, no? The music of the instruments.
Yes.
And he's being commissioned. He's going to do a commission of a work, of musical work for the music section of the bank, with inspired and with the objects of the collection. And he has been thinking about these same ideas as us, and how to approach these objects and how to produce this work. And he was telling us that he's now using completely different parameters to look at these objects and the sounds, and know more about he's trying to, well, this is also like a movement now of I imagine, I guess, theorists of music, and they are developing new concepts to understand these ancient or these objects from different other cultures as spatiality, the space in which the objects or the effect in the space of the objects, and some other concepts different from rhythm and melody and harmony, the four concepts that have been used by understand music in Western culture. And I feel that it's more or less what we are trying to do here, no? It's discovering other ways of understanding these objects, feeling these objects, getting into these objects. And I don't know, maybe we can think of or as Sarah was saying, let's not use those concepts that we have been using always to describe or to understand these objects. Maybe we can have a conversation with him, because I think I feel it's very much related with the problem of this exhibition, or of understanding.
Invite him.
I don't know what, Hector, what do you think of bringing him?
I completely agree. Absolutely.
I mean, exactly. He's one of the reasons why we really wanted to work with him, it was exactly because he had been thinking, and it aligned with what we were thinking and trying to ask some of the same questions and confront some of the same exactly original, or Western parameters of classification and categorization. And we love that he brings that to the project and not just the musical composition, and the skills. He brings the thought to it as well, because he really cares. So yes, we should talk to him, because exactly some of the music that will be in the exhibition, if we're trying to create something immersive, maybe that will link up with text, and link up with words. So
he's composing the music for the exhibition, that it's going to be all present.
Yeah, but this work, I think it's going to be completely different to what he has been doing, and to what has been done around this object, no?
And he's been working also closely with Mamo Camilo, so that makes it. He understands this dialogue. He really actually does.
Yeah, we should invite him.
Very good. I think it was a very important acuerdo. ¿Cómo se dice acuerdo?
Agreement.
Agreement, exactly. It is a very important agreement. So what Sara proposed, I think it's one of our agreements. And in order to do it is really radical, it's really important, and we will work not only on the wall text for each of the sections, but we will work on how to make these objects come alive through small chats that are going to be in the museum, not only on the guide. So we are in agreement with that. And I think that is very important, because young people are going to be very used to being able to use the phone but there will be some other visitors that would like very much the traditional way of going into the museum, just reading. It's a moment of being alone, no? Not lonely, but alone. And so we should have these both things. So I think if you agree, we can start with these agreements.
Yeah.
The other agreement that I think it is that the text on the wall are going to be reading in. I wish I had your way of saying things, Roberto. You're amazing, but I will just say in a very poetic way to evoke, and that in that poetry and evocation, we're evoking a dialogue that it's a dialogue within ourselves, in a sense, that was guided by Mamo Camilo and Kaiser, but now that it's introjected into ourselves in terms of how to understand this world and how to really value its values, no? So to speak, if you would agree, just to start having some agreements, so we would we can start working. Do you agree with these two? Because that was kind of the summary of the whole conversation.
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to summarize.
I want to add something, is that I think it's also important to have into account the way you display the object. And I think there's also a message, or a way to a big power there in how you show the objects. I think it's not just a matter of text, it's also of displaying the object. For example, I want to tell you about some pectorals that were always displayed, these pectorals from the Sinu region, and they have this kind of mountains, or in that sobresalen, that and we have always displayed them in a vertical way, and understand and understood them as breasts, and pectorals with the shape of breasts. Now we think they are landscapes, and if you look at them in a horizontal way, they look like landscapes. And they have animals, they have fish and reptiles, and also some other forms that probably refer to landscape marks. So I think in the way you display things, we should discuss that also, because with the objects, not just the text, also how to descentrar or these we want to get into the people, like to think different in the way we display, or you display the object.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maria Alicia, because that's what we were trying to get to with that word immersive. Instead of text and a visual experience, to somehow join those two evocatively, effectively, in ways that our viewers are going to take away. And I think this is one of the things we've been talking about this entire time, but that idea that all of the senses play a role in this, perhaps not smell, but we're working on it, would be exceptionally interesting for us at the MFAH. And I think for everyone.
Yeah, and oh, sorry.
Sorry, I wanted to ask you, Julia, remember this experience that we had, that you had with Hyson looking at one object, and he said all of a sudden what it was like. I think in this looking at the objects, even if it is through Zoom, that we do this exercise with the key ones. I think we should invite Hyson, because anytime that we showed him something, he's really so habituated to see things in a different way, because he uses similar things, that I think it would be very important for us to invite him to a session where we would see all the objects in the exhibition, to create these chats, but also to do what Maria Alicia is saying, to think of displays.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I was going to say, you know, we obviously have our checklist, and, you know, I've been trying to think about each piece in terms of what it really is, you know, exactly details like what Maria Alicia is mentioning, where, well, is it supposed to be this way or this way, you know, and actually how are you looking at it, you know, and what do you see when you look at it from a different angle? You know, exactly, I don't think we can go through obviously the 400 works, but if we maybe identify, and I've realized that we're also at an hour, I don't know if people have to go, that, you know, we should definitely share the checklist. Everybody can look at it. I mean, I understand this is, you know, a lot of work to for somebody like Roberto, you know, to look through the 400 pieces, but there's things that I would like to urgently clarify. So things like that, you know, do we call something like that a pectoral? If that's currently the title, maybe we should change it, you know, and it should say pectoral with mount, or it's a disc with landscape, or disc with mountains, and not pectoral with protrusions, right? So those little details would be really great to clarify as soon as possible, so that even in the checklist, we reflect some of those same epiphanies or insights as we then can do in the exhibition. And that I can share that list very, very quickly with people, and people can, you know, Sarah and I tried to go through and think through each just basic descriptive, but I think we could definitely do with more of that, and even at this stage. And then
I think, Julia, sorry,
see,
I think almost each piece asks for a different title. So sometimes I think it would be good to say pectoral, but in some other objects, probably not.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, and it's you know, it's not that we have to reinvent everything, but if we, in those moments where we see the different way of interpreting something, we should absolutely take advantage of that. And
we probably also to look at the object very carefully, and what you can I don't know, acentuar. You can make an accent, or you can I don't know, it's like
Yeah.
the object, what you want to see there, or what you want
Absolutely.
to get from it, no?
Absolutely. And so maybe just on a practical note, and then I'll let Sarah talk, you know, we can exactly, we should each think about, like we said at the very beginning, what are the key concepts, what are the key stories, what are the key insights that we want to convey or that we want to kind of bring across, communicate in each section, or in each, whatever groupings are in your head as important. And we should then do that exercise together with Gijssen of exactly identifying some of those key narratives, and maybe we each write them down and then look at them. And the same thing with some pieces that we pick, some of the key pieces that we really want to dive into and think about together. Yeah, because we can't do the whole thing.
In terms of organization, today I'm really practical. I don't know. It might be that it's May and it's Taurus and it's the earth influencing. But I think, why don't we, if you agree, it's just an idea. I think the idea to go through each section, Julia, I mean, we could do that work, like each section, when we thought the section would be, why it is named that way, with objects, no? And we can go and review each section like that. And to that section, we can invite Gijssen. And again, record, take notes. And then Roberto, you can, from there, lead the conversation into how we can translate that conversation into writing with assigned tasks for everyone. That could be our next meeting. I think it would be really good to start.
Speaking of practicalities, I just wanted to say, I recognize that I think I may be the only non-bilingual person here. I understand enough Spanish to follow along when I hear it, but I can say nothing in return. If it would ever be more useful to have meetings in Spanish, please don't feel obliged to have them in English on my behalf. If it would ever be helpful to collaborate and get back to me, or I can just be an observer and Julia can sort of chime in with me to translate for moments that might be useful for me. I don't want to sort of center my monolingualism if it would ever be useful to work in Spanish, especially like I think bringing in Gijssen is a fantastic and marvelous idea. So I'm happy to be at the linguistic disadvantage, if that would ever help. Oops.
Can I don't think Zoom translates, but there's another platform that translates.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
Google,
there are some running
Google meetings
translations.
translate.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I don't know how well it translates, but I'd be happy to experiment with that.
Yeah, it's not bad for following along on a meeting.
Great.
But yeah, so in terms of next steps, I mean, exactly, I can absolutely, and I have vaguely section descriptions, but not together with images right now. But I can and was planning to put something like that together for Roberto, you know, and for Gijssen as well, so that they can see, so that we can all see what are the things that we think about exactly, and that you please all add, you know, your perspectives to that, because I have my view of what I think we want to say, but so I can start, or other people can start, and we can share that.
Have you placed all the objects already into galleries, more or less?
We have a preliminary floor plan, yes.
That's helpful too, because it seems that if there's going to be some kind of wall text, the objects will be the departure point for any kind of.
Yes, we have all of the works assigned to their sections to go with the story that we wanted to have them tell. So that I can share. The floor plan is incredibly hard to read because everything's very, very small, but I can do a narrative.
Perfect.
You know, and throw some of the checklist images in that, so that you can see what they are.
Yeah, PowerPoint. No?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
I think we might have a plan.
It's good.
Oh, and just speaking of plans, one one more thing I just wanted to very briefly go back to. I think, Roberto, you had brought this up at some point, when do we want to integrate the gallery designers and the exhibition designers into this process? Typically, this conversation happens in some ways later in exhibitions because we're doing a much more sort of standard exhibition as by default for other exhibitions, and this one is such a different radical kind of experiment. So yeah, so thinking at what point we want to bring in the designer, again, just sort of conversationally thinking about what is possible, what ideas that spark. So I don't know when that key moment would be, but maybe Julia and Diana, maybe we can talk about that.
At the museum, we are introducing the designers since the beginning. They are participating in many of our discussions, curatorial discussions, and about content. And
yeah, I mean, our designer has been involved from the beginning in terms of the visual, but I think in terms of specifically the text, exactly, like, he has thought about all of the sections and all of the stories and how those interact in space. But obviously now the kind of additional text that goes with it, we can involve him again. But I feel like that we're trying to do so many things at once. I would probably start with us trying to say, like, okay, these would be our key stories, and these would be some of the works that we really want to think through. And then, but absolutely, we can invite Martin anytime. He's extremely excited to.
I think it inspires him too.
Yeah.
It gives him the. And he would be so happy to be just witnessing the process.
And Chelsea and I are also in some pretty intense dialogues with our designers already, and we're just bringing the fruits of each of these conversations back to them, and they seem to really enjoy hearing about it. But at some point, to participate in it would be even more exciting for them, and I think probably more productive for all of us. Maybe not this next time, but fairly soon.
Okay, we are giving more voice to them.
Yeah.
They are participating much more in the exhibition. Yeah, we are trying to avoid that linear process that we have had for a very long time. Now we are having much more dialogues between the different areas, and getting the product is much more a collective product than the product of the curators, and the others obey.
So shall we schedule that meeting? And in that meeting, we would invite Hyson already? I think so, no?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he can be there. If not, we can do another one and just communicate what ideas came up, and he can react later.
And also very pragmatic.
He goes to La Sierra and his schedule, it's on.
Would it be better for Aurora to initiate this thing, or do you want me to, or we can get somebody at my museum? I think it might be more helpful for Aurora to be the central focus.
She's in vacation. Tomorrow is her birthday. And but I'll tell her.
Yeah, she can definitely help with scheduling, and I will do exactly our designer Martin has promised me the tweaked floor plan by the end of this week. So I know that I've promised it to Rex and to Chelsea and to other people for a while. But in terms of the kind of updated just checklist for people to look at, a package with images to, we can make sure that we all have access to those same materials. And I will dig up our old walkthrough. Exactly. Luckily, we've been preparing some of these things for a long time because we had to apply for an NEH grant 3 years ago. But I will tweak that and update that. And either I can share one document that people add to, but I think it may be easier if each of the curatorial group here, I mean, I'm especially thinking Hector Maria Alicia, but Chelsea and Rex as well. If you think about each of the sections and what your key messages would be or what your key things would be, and then we can share that and have our next conversation with Roberto and with Gijssen to talk through those and say like, okay, so what are the key themes and what do we want to really dive into and how? Would that be practical?
I think it's super practical in my point of view to have kind of a PowerPoint section 1 with a little blurb of what it is, some of the key objects there, section 2, a blurb, some of the key objects there. That is a very easy way to, because you can add slides and have the concepts. And I don't know, I think PowerPoints for exhibitions are really very good.
Yeah, it's great for being visual and for giving a basic overview. In terms of diving into nitty-gritty concepts and thoughts, for me, it needs to be on a text document.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that can be produced from the PowerPoint, but the PowerPoint serves as a basis for everyone to just look at things and then.
I mean, that we have. We can just share what we have.
With the
So I
blurbs of
can-
each section and just
'Cause
try
we
to
did
put
that.
as many objects that are key to that into that.
Yeah, we can share that as long as people understand exactly that we. Yeah, I can figure out a way of doing that
Okay.
without reinventing a 400-piece exhibition on a PowerPoint and getting.
Of course. It's just
Um,
these sections with a blurb of what we thought and some of the key objects. And that is enough for us to be thinking about it and really being able to see the objects.
Yeah, I can
clearly.
share that with you very, very quickly because that we have from our
Fantastic.
original conceptions. But in terms of details and really some of the thoughts that we discussed today here, I think that needs to be a new.
Yeah, that we will create, but this is the basis for this exercise to be ready for the next conversation.
Yeah.
Before we all leave each other, I did want to share, did I ever communicate that we received an NEA for this exhibition? And it's because of all your excellent work and especially the Museo del Oro and the LACMA team's initial fantastic ideas that we got that NEA. I've not communicated that. I've been
No, I
remiss.
didn't know that. I didn't know that. Well
And
done.
any what? NEA?
NEA, National Endowment for the Arts.
Oh, so fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. When did that happen? Was that just recently?
Maybe 3 or 4 months ago.
That's fantastic. Wonderful.
Awesome.
Awesome. Super good. So I think we're on track now. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
I look very
you so
forward to
much.
the next step.
Yeah, this is exciting.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day.
Have a good day.
Cuídense.
Hasta la
Igual.
próxima.
Mismo.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Chao.
Ciao.
Julia, ¿tú nos mandas la grabación? You send
Sí,
us-
Rex, Rex, it's
Oh,
going to.
Rex?
Yeah, when you hang up, it'll automatically start loading and saving. So you just then go find the file once it's saved. Zoom will
I'll-
give you the instructions.
Excellent. And I'll upload it to a thing we have at the university and I will share that link. And everybody should be able to watch it at their leisure anytime and it won't go
Super.
away.
Great. Thank you, Rex.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Chao.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Hasta luego.